In this video, we're looking at the power of indices, the power at which they increase rapidly until the number becomes astronomically large. An old legend tells the tale of a chess match between a local king and a visiting sage. The king offered a reward to the sage if he beat him. The sage requested that if he won, the king should pay him in the following way. Place 1 grain of rice on a square of a chessboard. Place 2 grains on the next. 1, 2. Place 4 grains of rice on the next square. 1, 2, 3, 4. The next one will have 8. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. The next one will need to have 16. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 14, 15, 16. Well, that's going to take a long time. So the next one obviously will have 32, then 64, then 128. And that's just the first row. Using this pattern, keep going until all the squares of the chessboard have been used. Then give all the rice to the sage. The sage won the game of chess. You probably could have guessed that was going to happen. How much rice did he earn? What is the pattern here? Let's look at some figures. On the first 8 squares of the chessboard, 1 to 8, the pattern is 1, 2, 4, 8, 16, 32, 64, 128. As you can see from the table, 1 is the same as 2 to the power 0, 2 is the same as 2 to the power 1, 4 is the same as 2 squared or 2 to the power 2, etc. And by the time we get to the 8th square, we've got to 2 to the power 7, which is 128. Let's skip a few and go up to the end of the next row. On the 16th square, there'll be 32,768 grains of rice, which is 2 to the power 15. So that's just 2 rows of the chessboard. After 3 rows of the chessboard, there'll be 24 squares and over 8 million grains of rice on the one square. That's not counting all the squares that have come before. That square is equivalent to 2 to the 23 grains of rice. When we get up to the 32nd square, that's halfway through the chessboard, there are over 2 billion grains of rice that need to be put on that square. That's 2 to the 31. Interestingly enough, if you look at the numbers for the powers, they don't seem to have gone up that much. 2 to the 0 on the first square, 2 to the 31 on the 32nd square. Doesn't seem to be that huge a number. But 2 to the 31 is a huge number. It's over 2 billion. When we continue the pattern, one of the things you'll see is that even though there is a huge amount of rice on the first half of the chessboard, the second half is going to be even more extreme. That's the nature of exponential growth. When indices are involved, growth is a lot bigger. Let's look at the last 4 rows of the chessboard. By the time we get to the 40th square, which is at the end of the 5th row, the number is so big that we've resorted to writing it in scientific notation. This number is 5.94, but that's a 5 with 11 decimal places after it. So I need another 9 zeros after the 594 to get the number. That's a very big number. That's equivalent to 2 to the 32. After the next row, which is 48 squares, you can see the number has increased to 1.4 by 10 to the 14. After 56 rows, 3.6 by 10 to the 16, and after 64 rows, 9.22 by 10 to the 18. Doesn't seem all that much because now it's just got the number 18 in it. But 10 to the 18 means there are 18 numbers. That's a million, million, million. So the 64th square has to have 9 million, million, million grains of rice on it. could be a bit tricky. So those numbers are getting a bit hard to understand or to deal with. So how much rice is that really? What does it mean in the amount of rice that the king has to give to the sage? Let's start off with this assumption. 50,000 grains of rice is about 1 kilogram. Now, of course, this is just a rounded off figure. Different sorts of grains of rice will take up different amounts of volume and also weight. So depending on what sort of rice you use, you might have a bit more or a bit less than that. But we're just going to use 50,000 grains just to give you the idea of how big these numbers really are. So we know after 32 squares that there was 2147483,648 grains of rice. That's 2 billion grains of rice. Using the assumption that 50,000 grains of rice is about 1 kilogram, all I need to do is divide the 2 billion by 50,000. And that gives me 42949 kilograms. That's almost the same as 43 tonnes. Now, assuming that a car is about a tonne, that's the same as, or the same mass, or the same weight as 43 cars. That's a lot of rice to fit on the 32nd square. Now let's look at the 64th square. The 64th square had 9.22 by 10 to the 18 grains of rice. Remembering, of course, that that's 9 million grains of rice. Again, let's divide that by 50,000 and we get 1.84 by 10 to the 14 kilograms. Again, this is a really big number and it's hard to fathom what it means, but it's actually 4 billion times bigger than the number that we had up here for the kilograms on the 32nd square. So the very last square has 4 billion times more kilograms of rice on it than the square in the middle. In life, people often exaggerate, but it's no exaggeration to say that's an amazingly immense increase on what was on the middle square. So just to round it all off and find out how much rice that is all together, so all the rice on the board just to remind you, the pattern is the rice on the board is equal to 2 to the power 0 plus 2 to the power 1 plus 2 to the power 2 plus 2 to the power 3 plus ... all the way up to 2 to the power 63. When we work out how much rice that is in kilograms altogether, we get 3.689 by 10 to the 14 kilograms of rice. Roughly half of that is just on the last square, as is the nature of exponential growth. Now, let's have a look and see what that means in terms of something a bit more manageable. Assuming there are 7 billion people on the Earth at the moment, if I divide that by 7 billion, then what I'm going to do is find out how much each person on the Earth that's alive gets. And that turns out to be 52 1,704, or 705 if I round it off, kilograms of rice each. That's 52 tons of rice for every person alive on the planet now. That's a lot of rice. No wonder when the king found out how much he owed the sage, he was pretty angry. I'll leave it up to you to think about what happened next, but if you do a bit of research on the internet, you find quite a few different endings to this story.